Good evening, this is Jimmy Jive, and you're listening to Motor City Rock Hawk. Tonight, my guest is a true legend in Detroit, the metropolitan area, has been in the business for 60-odd years, and has played with a number of national acts, including Mitch, Ryder, Detroit Wheels, Buddy Miles Express, Cactus, the Rockets, Mystery Train, and a whole, probably a mess of other things that I'm not even aware of. But anyway, tonight my guest is guitarist Jim McCarty. Jim, how you doing tonight?
Jimmy, how you doing, buddy? I'm all right.
I'm doing really good, thank you. All right, how I decided I'd like to start is, where exactly from the Detroit metro area did you grow up?
I guess it would be the east side.
East side?
On the 7 Mile Mound Road area, 7 Mile Outer Drive.
Okay. And what drew you, growing up, and I imagine that's what, the 50s, to playing guitar over, bass or anything else?
Well, initially I didn't play guitar. I played drums.
Oh, really?
My father was a drummer back in the big band days, and I started playing the drums when I was about 3 years old. I took drum lessons for about 5 years, and I played drums. It wasn't until the second hit record that Mitch, Ryder, and Detroit Wheels had that I actually said, "Well, I guess I'll be a guitar player." But yeah, I played the drums for a good while.
Do you play them at all anymore, even for fun?
Not so much anymore. When we were doing the jams here and there, occasionally I would jump on the drums when somebody came up to jam. I would get behind the drums for a couple tunes.
Oh, wow.
But, it's too much work.
I can understand that. I'd never had the dexterity to play the drums myself.
Yeah, but my daddy was a drummer, and so I kind of inherited that. And
you say he played in the big band era. I'm sorry.
He never really played with anybody of name, but he knew folks. He knew Benny Goodman, he knew Peggy Lee, he knew Gene Krupa.
That's incredible.
That's kind of what I grew up listening to, was jazz. And
right.
At this point in time, however strange it might sound, on a day-to-day basis, I listen to more jazz than I do anything else. All the Blue Note stuff, the hard bop.
That's some really good stuff. I enjoy that too. I played jazz.
Yeah, it's kind of what I grew up with.
Yeah.
But I started somewhere in my teens. Around 14 or 15, I picked up the guitar, still playing the drums, because I was just fascinated with the guitar. I just thought it was such a cool instrument. There's no instrument that gives you that wide a range of colors.
That's
all
true.
The way from Segovia to Jimi Hendrix. And I just started teaching myself guitar.
Oh, so you're self-taught on the guitar?
Yeah.
Wow. So were you learning the early music basically by records or radio or?
Yeah, records. I was always attracted to the blues, so there was I was listening to a lot of blues, a lot of B.B. King and Albert.
I was going to say, who would have been your major influences as far as the guitar?
Oh, if I had to pick one, it would B.B. King. It would be, if I had to pick one.
Wow.
But I mean, there was tons, rock influences. Obviously, Hendrix and
right.
Clapton.
Yeah.
And I knew Mike Bloomfield. Mike was a tremendous guitar player. Blues-wise, it was B.B., Albert, Freddie, all the Kings. Always liked Hubert Sumlin, guitar player for Howlin' Wolf.
Did you get into like Chuck Berry? Because of
course, yeah.
Because I hear a lot of that kind of stuff in some of the later stuff, especially with the Rockets.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of agree with Keith. I mean, like Chuck took the Chicago Chess Blues Band,
right?
Willie Dixon and those guys, and he said, "We're going to do it with this beat,"
right?
Created what's called rock and roll, but
Exactly.
it was the Chicago Blues Band backing him up.
Right.
And he wrote the book.
Yes.
He was the first guy ever inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and that's as it should be.
Did you ever get a chance to play with him at all, or anything with that?
Yeah, the Detroit Wheels backed him up on 2 or 3 gigs here and there on the road.
Yeah.
It's hilarious. He wouldn't go on stage unless he got paid first.
Yeah.
He would just grab whatever band was there. You back him up.
Yeah.
He wouldn't even tell you what key he was going to start the tune in. He turned to B, our drummer, Johnny B, and he said, "Just follow my foot."
Yeah. Yeah, I heard that about him.
And you're off and running, and you just, and he drives the, crowd went crazy.
Yeah. What was, What band were you playing in at the time the Mitch Ryder thing came about?
Well, it was I met Johnny B. Bedanjic,
Right.
one of the best drummers ever come out of this
Oh,
city.
absolutely.
And I met him through our fathers. My dad knew Joe, John's father, and the two fathers kind of introduced us. I started actually giving John drum lessons.
Really?
Initially, I went over to go over to his house, give him drum lessons, because he was just kind of starting on the drums, and I had been playing, obviously for 10 years or whatever. And when we get done with the drum lesson, I would grab the guitar.
Right.
And me and him would start playing, just messing around.
Yeah.
And then we got Earl Elliott tied up with Earl, the bass player, and we had the three of us, and we did the Michigan State Fair backing up. John would remember who it was. I can't remember his name.
Right.
Black fella. We were backing him up, and there used to be a place down on Woodward Avenue called the Village. We went down there one night. It was all black acts, and we backed up a few people, and they dug the band so much that we became like the house band there. We would back up. It was kind of like a review. Everybody would come out and do 3 or 4 songs, and then the next guy would come out. And you got these white kids backing up the black guys, right?
Wow.
And then one night, Bill Levice came down, this white guy, and sat in, and there was an obvious, immediate chemistry there. So we got together and became Billy Lee and the Rivieras. We used to play out at a place called Wall Lake Casino.
Yeah.
And started making a name for ourselves locally. And Dave Prince, the disc jockey, called a friend of his in New York and said, "You should hear these guys." They flew us to New York. He changed the name of the band to Mitch Ryder and the Detroit Wheels, which I hated.
Why was that?
I thought it was a stupid name. But after the second hit record, I got used. After the second hit record, I got used to it.
I mean, was the name in reference to Detroit? I mean, Wheels and all that.
Well, that's what he did.
Right.
Yeah.
But, okay.
I thought it was kind of hokey initially.
How did you get on in those days with Mitch Ryder?
Oh, well, we were all kids, He was the youngest. Christ, John left high school. He never even finished high school.
Wow.
But we had a good time. They put out a record. The first record they put out, a thing called I Need Help, where they didn't use the band. All they did was use me with a big band, right?
Right.
But Bob Crew, the guy who produced the band, we'll get to that. He made the huge mistake of all he saw was Mitch Ryder. All he saw was the singer.
Right.
He didn't have a clue that it was a combination of the band and the singer that was the hit-making machine.
Right.
So the first record was just me playing the guitar solo, and it was a big band, and it went nowhere. And then finally it dawned on him, well, we'll record the band,
Yeah.
But basically the first album was what we were doing in the clubs at the time, and I had Jenny take a ride on it, and that became our first hit.
Now, was that one that you wrote, or the band wrote, or was that more or less?
No. That was we never wrote anything. It was Little Richard's Jenny and C.C. Ryder.
Oh, that's
which is
right.
old blues stone.
Yeah.
Hit.
Yeah, it was.
And then the next one was Devil with a Blue Dress on, where we did Devil with a Blue Dress and Good Golly Miss Molly. Put those two together.
Were you guys more or less under contract to do that type of material as opposed to writing stuff?
No, the thing is, we would have gotten to the point where we started writing our own stuff. If the band had been nurtured and taken care of, like Andrew Lou Goldman did with the Stones,
right?
There's no telling what that band could have done, because it was a hit-making machine.
Yeah, it was.
Like I say, all Crew saw was Mitch Ryder. And then the next record, Sock It To Me, which I thought was pretty candy ass. He wrote that. That was a hit for us.
Yes.
And then for whatever reason, they decided, okay, we'll get rid of the band and we'll make Mitch a superstar.
Yeah, but he had to have a band. Why?
Well, they gave him a band. They gave him like a Las Vegas band.
Oh.
And he went right down the toilet. And it was even years later, Crew admitted it was one of the biggest mistakes I ever made.
Oh,
letting the band go.
I agree.
So,
because you guys were so solid. That's for sure.
Coulda, woulda, shoulda.
Yeah.
Is what it is.
Okay, that's real interesting. And over the years, I've seen video and all that. You've gotten together with Mitch Ryder over the years and done some other little performances here and there.
Yeah, we got together one time out at Pine Knob.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen Bill in the last 8, 9, 10 years now. I haven't seen him in a long time. I think he lived in Georgia. Somebody told me.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
Well, he had a unique style and unique voice, but I do think that that all came out of the chemistry of the band. I mean, the style. I mean, a lot of what he was doing seemed to be like mimicking James Brown and some of the R&B groups at the time.
Well, that was what all of us had in common: our love for R&B and blues.
Right.
We were one of the first white bands to do respectable versions of black tunes.
Extremely respectable. I mean,
yeah, well, he had a hell of a voice.
Yes.
One of the greatest voices in rock and roll.
Absolutely. And were those albums then recorded in New York?
Yeah, they were all recorded in New York. It was a great story. We were at Bell Sound one day, which was a huge studio in Manhattan, and we had to wait out in the lobby with all our equipment in there because whoever was recording in there was running overtime, right?
Yeah.
So we sat out there with all our equipment. About an hour went by, and then finally James Brown and his band came out, and he apologized. And we all, don't worry about it, James. Take as much time as you want, buddy.
Exactly.
It's okay, brother. So that was a pretty amazing moment.
Speaking of New York City, do you remember a certain gig with a radio DJ by the name of Murray the K?
Yeah, sure.
How did that go down? I heard that was a little interesting because the
Cream
was there.
I think you're talking about the what the hell was that place we played? Oh God, I can't remember the name of it. Down in not Brooklyn. What the hell was that? It was a huge place. It was like another review.
Right.
It was Mitch, Ryder, There was a ton of acts on the bill. There was an act from England called Cream that were making their American debut. Yeah, Murray the K kind of was one of those guys who wanted to make sure that wherever the spotlight was, he was there. He tied into the Beatles when they came to town. And what the hell was the name of that place? I know it and I can't think of it now.
Was that the first time Cream came to the States? Was for that kind of
I believe so. Yeah, I believe so.
Wow, that's interesting.
Boy, it's on the tip of my tongue. What was the name of it? It was a big theater.
I couldn't tell
you. There was like a dozen acts on. Everybody came out and did 3 or 4 songs.
Wow. Were they all nationally signed acts like the Detroit Wheels?
Oh yeah, we had a hit record by then.
Right. Do you remember anybody else other than Cream that would have played it down?
Oh, I'm trying to remember. There was the Shangri-Las.
Oh, jeez.
Patti LaBelle, I believe, was there.
That's cool.
I think Wilson Pickett, I believe.
Gee, that's some all-star.
I can't remember.
No, I understand.
There was a lot of acts.
Okay. Well, anyway, so, Mitch Ryder's more or less departed from you guys. And how long did it take you then to get connected? I understand the next phase, well, one of the next phases, I imagine, was with Buddy Miles Express. How did that come about? Yeah,
in between the Mitch Ryder and Buddy Miles was 1969.
Right.
I tied up with Corky Siegel for a little bit, the Siegel Schwall Blues Band. He had a falling out with Jim Schwall, and he had gigs all along the West Coast, starting at the Fillmore in San Francisco. And he called me. I went to Chicago, and we had Sam Lay on drum, one of the greatest shuffle drummers to ever come out of Chicago.
Wow.
Sam was the original drummer on Paul Butterfield's original band, on Paul Butterfield's first album. Oh yeah, Sam was unbelievable shuffle drummer. Great guy too.
Oh.
And but I did the thing with Corky for a little bit.
Sure.
And then when we were in L.A. at the Whiskey A Go Go, Buddy Miles came down.
Yeah.
And caught the show, and he had just left Mike Bloomfield's Electric Flag.
Yeah.
Mike had put a band together called the Electric Flag. Yeah, great first album. And he got signed to Mercury, and he was going to do his own thing. And he was putting the band together, and he was a big fan of Mitch Ryder and Detroit Wheels, and he wanted me to join the band. And I was intrigued by it because it was a 4-piece horn section, and I was intrigued by the idea of playing with the horn. So at that point, I left Corky when we finished the gig in L.A., and I just stayed in L.A. I never went back home. Just stayed in L.A. and put the band together with Buddy.
Now, I've listened to some of the Buddy Miles Express, and it's, oh my God, it's incredible. And of course, your playing is incredible. Did you have to shift gears in any way as far as like equipment or your sound to do that?
Well, I played a Les Paul, and with Buddy, it was through Fender Twin. So we weren't into the Marshalls. The Marshalls happened when we were going to Cactus.
Yeah.
But it was basically just a Les Paul through a Twin. I've kind of always been a Les Paul guy.
Right.
I played Stratocaster here and there for a little while, but that I haven't. touched a Fender guitar in 10, 15 years now. I don't really mess with anything other than Paul.
You're always shown with that black Les Paul.
Yeah, that's. I mean, you're kind of either a Fender guy or a Les Paul guy. And for me, the Les Paul is at home.
Do you have your original Les Paul still, or?
Oh no.
You don't have any of the gear from back in the day?
The one I wish I had was the 1959 Cherry Sunburst that got stolen from me when I moved back to Detroit to put the Rockets together with John.
No.
Yeah, that guitar worth about $250,000 today.
I bet, no doubt. Oh my God.
Yeah, that was my welcome home to Detroit.
Jeez. Yeah, welcome home to Detroit, exactly.
But anyway, you know, I was with Buddy for 2 albums.
Yeah.
And then Jeff Beck came out with the Truth album, and that just blew me out the door.
Yeah.
That just me and a bunch of other guitar players. That one blew me out the door. And then he did the Beck Ola thing, and that's the direction I wanted to go in.
Right.
And while I was with Buddy, I had tied up out in L.A. with Carmine and Tim. Carmine Apiece and Tim Bogart from the Vanilla Fudge.
Mm-hmm.
They had come to the same conclusion I did. They wanted to put a power trio together. They were tired of the Fudge. There was a new band from England that had come over and was opening for them called Led Zeppelin and was blowing them off the stage.
Yeah.
And they said, this is the direction we want to go in. So they contacted me while they were in L.A. and I was in L.A. And we went in the studio and did a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And I didn't think all that much of it. But apparently it rang a bell with them because then when I was living in San Francisco, they got in touch with me. This would have been right around the end of '69.
Right.
I had left Buddy because, like I said, I wanted to get into what Beck was doing.
Right.
That really knocked me sideways.
Well, let me ask you one last thing about the Buddy Miles thing before we get to Cactus. There's a story or rumor that went around that after one of the sessions or whatever, you know, that you guys were hanging out with Hendrix, who produced most of the Buddy Miles stuff, from what I understand.
Yeah, no, Jimmy produced the one half of the second album.
Oh, I see.
I did the first and second album, and Jimmy produced the one half of the album.
Right.
He was always coming around the band. We were always bumping into him because he was talking to Buddy. He wanted to put a band together.
Yeah.
Which eventually became the Band of Gypsy.
Yeah.
He was tired of doing the Purple Haze, Foxy Lady thing, which is what people expected from him.
Sure.
And also, you have to remember, back in that point in time, he was taking a fair amount of flack from the black folks about playing with two white guys.
Yeah.
So, you know, that shit was going on. But there was a thing about Jimmy. He didn't give a damn what color you were. You know, you black, white, brown, purple. It was a question of, you know, what are you doing? What can you play? So he was way ahead of the times in that regard. And another important thing about Jimmy was he was one of those guys who wasn't just really good at what he did. He was one of those guys who changed the parameters of what we do. He redefined the boundaries, similar to what Louis Armstrong did in the 20s.
Yeah.
With the Hot Fives, Robert Johnson, Miles Davis, John Coltrane.
Right.
These are people who aren't just good; they redefine what we're dealing with.
Right.
And Jimmy was one of those people.
Did you? But the story is that one night you guys were in a club or whatever and you got up and jammed with Jimmy and something called Jimmy Jam or something like that.
No, it wasn't a club. Those were after hours. We would go to clubs, and then when the clubs closed at 4, we would go back to the record plant and play until the sun came up or whatever. And that's where the Jimmy Jam happened. You know, that during one of those sessions. But all that stuff that was never intended to be released as product. You know, that was just people trying to make $1 off this dead man.
Yeah, that's sad.
It was, but there was a thing with me and I think it was Mitch on drums and Buddy's bass player Roland was his name, I think, and Jimmy. And there's another thing that I sent out to a few people here. I found it in my closet about 4 or 5 months ago. A jam that happened in L.A. at Sunset Sound with Jimi Hendrix, Jim McCarty, Buddy Miles, Jack Bruce on bass.
Oh my God.
Yeah, well, everybody was high as a kite. So but it's pretty interesting.
How was it playing with Jimmy as far as his style versus your style?
Well, it was. I mean, I was in awe of the guy.
Right.
You know, can I say?
Yeah. So would that have been kind of one of the highlights in your career as far as playing with somebody? Because he's legendary, like you said. He changed the whole thing.
Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of hard to say because back at that time, I mean, I listened to the stuff I did, and I got up there and was playing. But I was just fortunate enough to be in a band that Jimmy was coming around all the time.
Right.
You know, and it kind of worked out that way. And it was very nice looking back now from this perspective. You know,
sure.
To have had the opportunity to not only play with the guy, but to hang out with him here and there. You know,
yeah. Well, it was such a sad thing that happened to him and all that. So
young.
He
was one of those people, you know, that they call it the 27 Club. Him, Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, they were all 27. Just it got too high.
Yeah, because it's so sad because just to think what a genius like him, as far as, like you said, revolutionary player, could have gone on to. You know,
well, it would have been interesting to see. He wanted to take his psychedelic thing and put it in front of a more of an R&B rhythm contact. Is what he wanted to do. Never really had a chance to do it.
Well, didn't he kind of start out that way though?
Well, he started out playing with the Isley Brothers and Little Richard.
Yeah,
so he doing strictly R&B.
Yeah,
that was before the fuzz bass was invented and Marshall amps. You know,
right? So he got his
hands on he got his hands on that. You know, all hell broke loose.
You saying he kind of wanted to incorporate that?
Well, he wanted to do. I mean, he'd done his 3 albums.
Right.
You know, his Electric Ladyland album was pretty amazing. He wanted to continue in that vein, but he wanted more of an R&B rhythm section.
Oh, okay. I get what you're saying.
That's what it was.
Okay.
You know, and he was still going to do his Jimi Hendrix thing.
Right.
But in my opinion, I mean, I've listened to the band of Gypsies, and Buddy was a great 2/4 drummer, just like Johnny B.
Yes.
Great, but Mitch Mitchell was the man, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
What Mitch did on those albums is almost as creative as what Hendrix was doing. He was the perfect drummer for Jimi Hendrix, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, that was a magical
he was so inventive, and so he was just tremendous.
Yes.
And then you had Noel just playing tonics, just holding down the bottom end, keeping it simple, while the other 2 guys, you know, took off.
Oh yeah.
So for me, that was the arrangement I liked, rather than the R&B arrangement on the rhythm section.
Right, that had to be a magical time though to be there. I mean, a lot of people say, "Oh, the past is, you know, this and that," but I wish I would have been around to see some of that. Unfortunately,
I was on stage more than once when Hendrix was playing.
That's awesome. All right, let's get into Cactus a little bit. So, Cactus, incredible band, and obviously you were a big, strong part of it, if not the strongest part of it, in my opinion. How did you feel about the early Cactus material?
I was in San Francisco after I had left Buddy, and Tim and Carmine got a hold of me. They were in New York. They wanted, like we said, you know, wanted to put a power trio thing together, pretty much the same. They were in the same place I was, and they had gotten Rusty Day, who was a Detroit guy. I knew Rusty. In fact, we had a band together for a short while. But they had gotten Rusty, who was a tremendous lyricist, and they were looking for a guitar player. Initially, Jeff Beck was supposed to tie up with them.
Yeah, I heard that.
He got involved in a serious car accident, and they got in touch with me, and I flew out from San Francisco to New York, and we started jamming, and the energy level was just through the roof. So I moved to New York, and we put Cactus together.
Well, the one thing I was going to ask you about Cactus, other than a few other things, obvious, who came up with the name? Was there any significance?
Carmine. They were when the Fuzz were touring in Arizona somewhere. They drove by the Cactus Drive-In. And Carmine said it'd be a terrific name for a band, and it was.
Yeah, it definitely was. There's no doubt about it.
But what happened, unfortunately for me, was we did the first album, and then we did the second album, and then by the third album, Tim was a little too flamboyant for me. Put it to you that way.
Really?
You'd have 3 guys playing their ass off, all in different rooms. And it was kind of like, well, if you can't play as a band, I mean, what's the point?
Yes.
But yeah, Timmy was just a little too flamboyant for me, and I got tired of it. So we lasted a couple years, and then ironically, somewhere in the mid-'80s or something, I started hearing this stuff about these other bands, these hard rock bands or whatever, even some metal bands.
Yes.
Which Cactus was never a metal band.
No.
These bands started citing Cactus as the influence, right?
Yes.
And Van Halen cited it. There was a bunch of people that cited the band as an influence, and that kind of that caught me by surprise. But on a good night, when everything was working right, and Tim was listening, paying attention, it was an ass-kicking band.
Oh, it definitely was. Oh my God, those songs.
Yeah.
Oh my.
Well, Carmine. I mean, I never had a problem with Carmine. It was basically Timmy.
Really?
But Carmine is one of the all-time great rock and roll drummers.
Oh, I know.
That guy is just a monster.
Oh yeah.
And there again, he's one of the guys. He's not just really good at it. He's one of the guys that invented that school of drumming. You know what they call the hard rock, the heavy drumming. When Led Zeppelin first came over here and was touring with them, Bonham used to stand on the side of the stage. I was told while Carmine was playing.
Yeah, well, he was an incredible drummer, no doubt.
So so it was always fun playing with Carmine. And the same thing kind of happened when we did the reunion thing in 2006. Right. Tim just started getting a little too flamboyant for me, but I love playing with Carmine. He's just an amazing drummer.
Yes. Let me ask you this. One of the songs that just totally blew me away based on the arrangement was Long Tall Sally going into Good Rocking Tonight. Who came up with that arrangement? How did you guys decide to do that?
That was my arrangement. Picked that line, and we instead of making a fast Little Richard thing, we pulled it back, and that was my arrangement.
And what the other thing about that was so cool to me, and other people have asked me to ask you this: what kind of distortion pedal were you using? I mean,
that was a thing called a Scrambler that Ampeg made. Really? I was about the only guy using that back then. It wasn't really a fuzz tone; it was a harmonic overdrive unit, and you could set it low, and you would get kind of an overdrive thing. If you set it up high, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, you get that insane sound like on Evil, or Can't Judge a Book. You get that insane harmonic thing happening.
I mean, because that sound you had at the beginning of Long Tall Sally, and then you play a little bit of it during the song also, was just so unbelievable. I hadn't heard any, and that's where I could understand some of these hard rock and metal bands listing Cactus as an influence, because you weren't just a hard driving blues rock band. You had a lot of things going on there, at least it appeared to.
Well, it basically was just kind of a boogie band at a certain extent. It was never as creative as Led Zeppelin. In fact, occasionally it was referred to as the American Led Zeppelin, which was always an embarrassment to me. Nobody's Led Zeppelin except Led Zeppelin.
Right, absolutely.
But when things were working right, it was an ass-kicking band. No doubt about that.
And you guys played everywhere. You played all over the world with that band. So
we pretty much played it. Phil Basile was the manager of the band.
Right.
And he was the guy who had managed Vanilla Fudge. And Philly was connected. Phil was connected with the mob in New York.
Wow.
Right. So we got on some gigs that we might not have gotten on if it wasn't for Phil. But he was great. You couldn't ask for a better manager. He's gone now.
Were there certain cities or venues that you liked playing more than others?
That's how I liked playing any place where everything was working right.
Right.
Because sometimes it wouldn't be going that way. But what was the place in Boston? There was a joint in Philadelphia, New York, the Garden.
Yeah.
Forum in L.A. Really big in Florida for whatever reason.
Yeah. At this point, were you using Marshalls then? Marshall stacks?
Oh, yeah. The very first time I ever played with the band was using Marshalls. Yeah. It was ridiculous. We went into the small studio to record the first album.
Yeah.
And a half stack, a 50-watt Marshall head with one cabinet would have been more than sufficient, right? But I set up 2 stacks. I want both stacks. Give me both. Give me more stacks.
Well, I knew they did that live, but I mean, they made you do that.
No wonder we're deaf.
So that they made you actually do that in the studio. I can see you doing that live because you want to have the big stage show, but you were doing that in the studio?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I learned that later on. I learned the 2 stacks was absurd. It was because the more amplification I used, the more Tim used. It was ridiculous. So by the time we got to the second album, which was done at Electric Ladyland,
right,
with Eddie Kramer, I think I was using a 100-watt head with one cabinet.
out of those 3 albums that you did, was one a favorite? Was there any one particular that
I probably
stands?
like the third one the best because at that point in time, I had told the band I wanted to leave. So we went into doing that album knowing that I was leaving. And I told the guy producing it, I said, I want to do very little overdubs here. I want to keep the overdubs to a minimum. I just want to make it live. That was the album that had Evil on it.
Yes, I know. Restrictions.
And each album had, the first album had Parchment Farm. Second album had One Way or Another, which is probably, in my opinion, the best original tune we ever did. That's a great song.
And were you pretty much doing all the writing other than maybe the lyrics then?
No, Rusty did the lyrics, yeah, and I came up with most of the music, yeah.
Oh, man. I mean, did they come out of, like, I don't know if the band at your level would have been doing this. Did they come out of, like, jams? Would you guys get together and jam?
Sometimes jams, and sometimes I would have a line, or even sometimes Rusty would have a hook or something, a lyric thing, and then we would put some music to it. Yeah, there was some stuff that was jamming, and it came out of that.
And how exactly did they, I mean, Rusty Day, I'm familiar with the fact that he played with Ted Nugent with the Amboy Dukes. How did he get into Cactus? What was the connection? Was that you?
Oh, they contacted. I wasn't in the band before where they got Rusty, so I'm really not sure about that. They contacted him in Detroit. They had apparently, I assume, heard some of his stuff. The guy was a great lyricist. I mean, he was one of those guys. I'm going to send you some stuff here when we get done with the interview. There's a live thing from New Year's Eve down in Baltimore. New Year's Eve, 71 into 72. Classic example of the band. And Rusty, we get into situations where we just start jamming. We play the song that we're going to play, but it would morph into some little jam or something. And Rusty was he was a dictionary of lyrics. He would just start making stuff up and just pulling lyrics out from here, from over there, from this song, from that song. It's unbelievable.
So he was improvising a lot.
Oh yeah.
Oh well, that's the most fun. I've often liked to do that stuff whenever I performed back in the day.
Well, when it comes down to a song, though, it wouldn't really be improv, and he would work out, the lyrics like on a tune like Alaska, which, in my opinion, it might be his finest moment lyrically. He worked out that whole story. We would get into situations where, he was just winging it, just like when I'm taking a solo or whatever.
Now, when you guys would be out on the road with Cactus, I know you played with Ream, I know you played with Jimi Hendrix. Were there certain bands at that time that you guys got along with better than others, or ones that you liked going with better than the others?
Oh, that's a hard question to answer. I don't know.
I'm sorry.
I don't know. I mean, we played with so many, we tour with, usually there would be groups of bands. It wouldn't be just us. Although, I remember we were opening for 10 years after, and they kicked us off the tour in Boston because they said Rusty was inciting a riot.
Yeah, I heard you guys more or less blew them off the stage.
Yeah, well, that's what I heard. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can really blow the headlining act off the stage, because that's who the people came to see.
Well, I don't mean blow them off, but they were.
They kicked us off the tour because this thing happened in Boston where a cop got involved.
Oh, so were there many?
Oh, well, it was complete madness with that band on the road. I'm not going to really go into it.
Right, I understand.
Yeah, it was complete madness, that band. There was the amount of hotel rooms that were destroyed. Rental cars that were destroyed.
Well, you were into that kind of behavior? That's kind of shocking.
Well, I was frustrated. with the bass player.
Oh.
So yeah, there was a lot of frustration on my part.
I get it. Did you ever in those days you mentioned Jeff Beck? Had you done any playing with him at all in a studio or anywhere on the road?
No, but when Cactus went to when Cactus went to London in '71, that would have been, Jeff came to my hotel room.
Right.
Came over to say hello to everybody, because like I said, initially he was supposed to have been the original guitar player in the band, and he came. I distinctly remember this. He came down to my hotel room. We were chatting, and my guitar, my Les Paul, was laying on the bed, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't plugged into an amp or anything. And he picked it up and he just started playing. And for about 5 or 10 minutes, he just played the living shit out of the guitar. And then he put it back down on the bed. And I looked at him and I said, "Well, it looks like you've recovered from your car accident." Yeah, he was he was a one of a kind.
Now,
He was an amazing guitar player. All the fusion stuff was never really my cup of tea. I liked him, in the Jeff Beck group. That's the kind of stuff I liked him
with
doing.
Rod Stewart,
he got into the fusion thing, but he was, it's like you say, well, this guy's a hard rock player. Okay, well, that guy's a blues guitar player. That guy's a jazz guitar player. With Beck, he was his own category.
Yeah, he was another one. Yeah.
He played Jeff Beck music. He was an amazing guitarist.
I love that early stuff too, but I was a fan of the fusion stuff. I really liked that, and I like players like McLaughlin.
No, I knew John too. I got John's the Mahavishnu, the first album. There was some amazing stuff.
Oh yeah.
But I was never a big fan. I'm never a big fan of fusion, what they call jazz fusion.
Right.
A jazz guy trying to play rock and roll is similar to a rock and roll guy trying to play jazz.
Yeah, totally different chops, for sure.
Yeah, the whole Return to Forever and that sort of thing was never my cup of tea, really.
No. Well, I get it,
I mean, they're great musicians, but it just wasn't my thing.
So, how was it when Cactus broke up? How did you feel? How did that go
Well,
down?
at that point in time, I came back to Detroit. At that point in time, I was disillusioned, and I was like, you have to remember, too, I don't know if you're aware, I mean, that band really took it on the chin. It got brutalized by the critics, man.
Yeah, I know.
It just got ripped to shreds by the critics. And it's hilarious because 35 years later, when we did the reunion Cactus 5 CD in 2006, it got tremendous reviews. one of my favorite bands, one of the most underrated bands. It was just hilarious. But at the time when the band was initially in 71 and 72, it just got brutalized by the critics.
Are you talking like Rolling Stone magazines? You guys get ragged on?
Yeah, pretty much all of them.
Wow.
So anyway, I came back to Detroit, and I wanted to get back to more of a rock and roll thing, which is what I did with Johnny B. We put the Rockets together.
Yeah, I was going to say, all right, we're going to end this right now. We're going to end this part one. Anyway, this is Jimmy Jive, and you've been listening to Motor City Rock Talk with my guest, Jim McCarty. Stay tuned for part two.